Live, my friend. Always something, Ben
It's
Whiting.
always something. It's
Something.
always something. But all we can do is say yes and roll with the punches. And here we are.
That is actually it. And we're here to create a limitless culture, my friend. This is everything you talk about, a limitless culture. But before we get into that, I just want to give a proper introduction to you, Ben Whiting. You are a transformative culture expert, workplace culture. It is all the talk. It is all the things. You're a magician and a mind reader. I mean, it's really that mind reader part that I always want to get, to figure out how we can do that better. And, I'm so grateful for you being here today, because really what we're celebrating today and the conversation that we're going to have is about Mental Health Awareness Month this month, and how mental health is the new superpower for business professionals. And I love that you understand why this is so important, and why we're living through a time where mental health is a lived experience. You don't have to just be a psychologist or a doctor to talk about it. We all want to figure out how to do well-being better. Mental health is so
Absolutely.
critical, right? To who we are at work and how we work and all of that. So welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to spend time with you.
Yeah, well, we were kind of joking before, because I am wearing this T-shirt that says "Create or Complain," and I just have to share, that it was started by like 7-year-olds, because their parents used to tell them "Create or Complain," like at the dinner table. You complain about something, you're either creating or complaining. So, on what side of the fence do you sit on?
Always creating. I think, our beliefs are essentially just practice thoughts. And the more we complain, the more we kind of see the world in a negative light, the more we see it in terms of things to complain about. However, when we go through the world focused on creating things and things to be grateful for, those are the things that kind of tend to stand out to us, because I think there's a great book called How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole. Uh, Someone I'm watching this, I'm sure will know her last name, but I always love the idea that beliefs are just practice thoughts. And so if we're practicing thoughts, even before we believe them, eventually we will adapt them, and eventually they can become the philosophy we use to create habits.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, this is maybe before we get to talking about sort of how the mental health component comes into play on the business level, culture level, from where you speak about it. Let's talk a little bit about, creating a limitless culture, sort of
Mhm.
the inspiration for you for that. And, what you're doing with that work in the keynotes you're doing, in the workshops you're doing. What are you finding out there in the world with this idea of how we can create a limitless culture?
Yeah, well, what I've discovered is, like, organizations, associations, companies, they have a culture, whether they're intentional about it or not. And I think one of the worst things you can do is be unintentional about it and let it get away from you, as opposed to taking steps to control it, to make sure that you're not only achieving results, but you're managing the relationships of the people within that culture. And coming from my background in leadership development, I was a road warrior corporate trainer for a long time. I trained on leadership, on the delegation, negotiation, conflict resolution, and how to use Microsoft Outlook. And I don't even use Microsoft Outlook. So I was just training a lot. And what I noticed is that, so many times we'd get this idea of people being like, these are great skills, but this is just a horrible place to work. I don't know how to implement them. Or something like, well, are you going to give this training to management? Because they're the ones that really need to hear it. And what that really kind of informed me is that the culture in these places needed a lot more than simple techniques and strategies around, skills. What they needed is how do we make sure people aren't just happy, but they're fulfilled? How do we make sure people are just as excited about driving to work as they are about driving home? And how do we make sure that people understand that we're not just cogs in a machine, but we're people that we care about? Because we hear so much about work-life balance. And the reality is I don't believe in that. I mean, we're all people and we have lives, and work is a part of that. I believe about being intentional about our work, intentional about our mental health, intentional about our physical health. And so that's just something that I got really excited about. And then when I started using my background in entertainment, magic, mind reading, to kind of convey this message, to make sure people aren't just sitting there in the audience receiving information, but they're having a fun experience that they'll actually remember long after I leave the stage. That's where I really kind of found my fulfillment. And that's what I do this day.
Yeah, I love that. I love that conversation around there is no such thing as work-life balance. Do you know what I have been saying lately? I
What
keep
have you been
saying,
saying?
I'm not building a business, I'm curating a life. That is what, right?
Yes, I love it.
Right.
That's
Like
fantastic.
we're here to curate, and that curation, it takes work. But to your point, it's about the intention that we put behind it, right? Maybe it's the awareness and then the intention. Like, can you talk about that, how you share those components?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what I like to do we'll talk about communication, connection, and mindset. Those are the three areas that my keynote covers. I talk about communication because it's butter in the pan for everything that we do. And as I was on the road as a trainer, I saw so many trainers that had really good content. The problem just was the audience was asleep while they were delivering it. And I realized, people, they don't connect with the best idea. They connect with the ideas that are communicated the best. And when we improve our communication and become more effective, we increase productivity, we reduce drama, and we ensure that people don't just hear us, but actually care about what we have to say. And I do that by teaching the audience a little bit of mind reading. And I hope this isn't too big of a spoiler alert, but I am not actually psychic. I can't read minds. All I did on stage as an entertainer is I obtained and delivered information, which is the exact same process as communication. So the question then is, why does this process sometimes feel like mind reading, creating these profound moments of connection, trust, and likability and influence? And other times, this process of obtaining and delivering information feels about as productive as trying to baptize a cat. The reason is that mind readers have a certain set of principles that they stick to while they're obtaining and delivering information. And that's what the first third of my keynote is all about. And like I said, when we communicate effectively, we reduce trauma, we reduce stress, and we just are more productive in general. The second part of my keynote is all about connection.
Wait.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Let's stop.
Stop the presses. You got to tell me, you got to tease out just a little bit. What are those principles that a mind reader has? Or these are the tricks that
yes.
you cannot share?
Well, the most important thing we have to realize when we're communicating is that effective communication is not about being right. So many of us think that if we say the right thing or if we have the facts behind us, that's going to make us a good communicator. And yet, how many times in our lives have we, known something was right, but we just couldn't get it through someone else's thick skull? Yes, that's because communication isn't about being right. It's about helping other people connect the dots on their own. And we do that by focusing not on the quality of the information we share, but of the quality of the questions that we ask. Because how many of us like to be micromanaged? None. How many of us like to be bossed around? None. How many of us like to make discoveries that make our lives easier? How many of us like to make discoveries that help us support the people and causes we care about? We all like doing that, which is to say we all like to connect our own dots. So we go through a few different strategies and ways we can do that. And this is another great way in terms of if you're in sales at all, people always say, how do you say you're a salesperson without being pushy or awkward or salesy? And it's all about questions, because when we ask questions, it inherently lets the other person know that we care. And people generally don't care what you know until they know that you care. Thank you, Zig Ziglar, for that quote that I love.
So true. Oh my God. I love that. This, and this whole idea that it's not about being right is just so interesting to me. Cause like, we forget that none of us even it's not like I want to talk to you because I believe I'm so right, but it comes across that way sometimes. And to your point, if we're like listening more to each other, we can communicate that better to one another.
Exactly. Everything we do is a balance of achieving results and managing relationships. And one isn't more important than the other, but if you neglect one, it will always impact the other. And so we have to be intentional about both of them.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, now you can move on. You can move on.
Well, the second part of the keynote, and this is, I love this. It's all about connection. And this is really where culture can thrive, because the number one driver of productivity, engagement, and even happiness at work is having quality relationships with the people we work with. And that includes our clients and our customers. So the middle part of the keynote is all about how do we create and sustain these relationships and then leverage them for motivation and influence, so we don't have to have cultures that worry about retention or turnover. And I'll tell you that, and since we're giving little tidbits away, the secret behind motivation I've discovered, motivation is not about finding ways to make people do great things. It's about making people feel great about the work they're already doing. So they
Oh, I love that.
intrinsically want to do more, and they intrinsically want to do better. Because when people, turnover right now is a word I hear a lot. But it's one thing to say, well, this person's paying me more and it's all about the numbers. But if I have a close relationship with my manager, it's no longer, ooh, there's more money over here. It's like, well, what about Steve? I really enjoy my time with Steve. I really enjoy this mentorship, this coaching, and Steve makes me feel great about my work. And I want to see what I can do to take it to the next level. It's all about those relationships. And the simplest way to do this is think of it as the oil in the engine for any company, corporation, association, nonprofit is feedback, positive and negative feedback. And research has shown that your feedback has to be balanced. But the balance is not 1-to-1. The balance is actually 4-to-1. If I want someone to take a piece of negative feedback from me and consider it, not be defensive, not place blame on anyone else, and actually maybe take action on the advice I give, research has shown that that person has to receive 4 pieces of positive feedback for every 1 piece of negative feedback I give them. The Harvard Business Review took a deeper dive into this, and they did a study of, I want to say it was like 2,500 teams across the country in corporate America, in associations, nonprofits, educational institutions. And they found that the top 5% of high performing teams across the board, the ratio was 8-to-1. 8 pieces of positive feedback for every 1 piece of negative feedback. They're complement cultures. And think about that, driving to work, knowing that for every little piece of criticism you get, you're going to get told 8 things that you're doing awesome and you're knocking it out of the park. And of course, the other side of that coin, the bottom 5%, the worst of the worst, that ratio was flipped, 1-to-4. And what does that feel like? Imagining driving to that, knowing that for every 1 thing you get told you're doing right, you're going to be told 4 things that you're doing wrong. It's not motivating. It's not at all. I mean, thinking about the first one, 8-to-1, that's like almost excited to go there because you know you're going to be working at a place that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, those feelings are what motivate us and what drive us.
Right. No matter what you do, you're going to get some of that positive love back. Oh my gosh, this is so good. What I love about this piece of it and that connection part is everybody wants to feel the aliveness, the joy, the spark of wonder, right? Your point, like curiosity. How do we instill that in one another? How do we do it together? How do we inspire each other to take those leaps? And those are truly the limitless cultures. And I just love that you are truly a practitioner in this space because of all of the training that you have done and just seeing people at work going through it. What are just before we move on to your last part, like, what are some of the ahas when somebody says, oh, okay, communication, connection, what's so different about that? That's low hanging fruit. What is it that they're missing? People could think it's low hanging fruit, but guess what? Most people aren't doing it right.
Exactly.
So what are you hearing about that?
First and foremost, having a message that's just stated clearly and succinctly. Great communication is not about being right. If you want to motivate someone, it's not about making them do great things. It's about making them feel great about the things they're already doing. And what I like to do to really kind of hit the point home is I want to make sure that the audience has an experience. So for example, when we talk about connection, I could throw the bullet points up there, cite all of these different, Harvard Business Review articles and studies. But the way I actually start that is I bring someone out of the audience and they do something amazing. They earn a standing ovation, making the company look like the rock star they are. And then, so the audience doesn't just hear it, they get to experience it and feel it. Because, the way our brain works, our memories aren't stored in the neocortex where like our language and logic and problem solving are. They're in the limbic center where our feelings are created and where our senses are. I mean, have you ever smelled something and it took you right back to a place in your childhood? That's because your sense of smell is right next to your brain, the part that remembers. And that's also where our feelings live. And that's also where decisions are made. So when I speak, I'm trying to make sure I'm not just aware of what the audience is learning, but what they're feeling moment to moment to moment. And so after that person comes up, they earn a standing ovation, do something amazing, have lots of fun. They go back and then I do the exact same thing they did very badly. And so it gets some laughs. But what I'm hoping is the audience can clearly see the difference between the two. And then, you're always wanting to try and bridge that gap between insight and action. And so I'm hoping that between that, and the studies and the points and the stories that eventually when they hear all this, it doesn't make them think of me. It makes them think of their own story. Because when they think of their own story and their own lives, that's when insight turns into action.
Yeah, it is that. I mean, we just need more of that connection now more than ever. Certainly, we always talk about it, right? After the pandemic, so much has been lost.
They talk about, happiness. One of the number one drivers of happiness is just having quality relationships. That's whether it's at work or outside of work. I think what was a Harvard study did like an 80-year research paper, or I should say experiment. And they realized that having great relationships in your life is a better predictor of longevity and health than anything else. If you are obese and a smoker, it will do more for your health to start developing quality relationships than it will to lose the weight and quit the cigarettes. And that just kind of utterly blew my mind. And we have to realize people are their best when they're happy and when they're experiencing fulfillment. And if we as corporations and associations aren't doing things intentionally to make people feel that way, we can't expect the best out of them. And, when our employees have, struggle with mental health issues, whether it's just the day-to-day grind of anxiety and stress, or whether it's someone who, like for me, for years had an undiagnosed condition that was causing depression and a bunch of other things we don't have to worry about. But when we get intentional about happiness and help people overcome that and erase the stigma around mental health, for one thing, making sure we offer all those options so people don't feel embarrassed about talking to a therapist. If I didn't have a relationship with a therapist, I don't know where my work would be, because one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that you can't succeed your way out of mental health. Like, it doesn't matter how much success you're feeling. If your mental health is in the dumps, you're going to be struggling. You're really going to be struggling. And so what I love about what you said is just about being intentional about having a full and complete life. If we can get managers and CEOs and companies thinking that way, I mean, the sky is the absolute limit. I mean, that's why I called it a limitless culture.
Oh, I love that. Hey, little technical stop here. I didn't record this yet. And thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. We're still gonna get some gold here. And somebody's gonna want to just rewatch the whole thing anyway, because you're that good. Listen, what is the last that last part? It's mindset. It was communication.
Mindset,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the big thing about mindset is, what I love about the mindset is, where focus goes, energy flows. And it's all about where we choose to put our focus. And the experiment I like to do with everyone in the room is I ask everyone to look around the room and count all of the red objects. And I give them a few seconds to do that. And then I ask them to close their eyes. And the game is simple. I'm going to ask you a question. And the only rule is you cannot open your eyes until you've answered that question. And the question is, how many blue objects are in the room? And I ask people to guess, open their eyes, and inevitably there's a lot they miss because they were looking for the red objects. And the lesson is simply the things you look for in life are the things that you find. If you go through your day looking for things to complain about, looking for reasons not to give people the benefit of the doubt, looking for, reasons not to give it your best effort, reasons to believe you can't achieve the things you want to, you're going to find those things all day long. Of course, if you go through your day looking for things that inspire you, looking for things that make you laugh, looking for reasons to like people and reasons to believe you can achieve things that maybe everyone else says is impossible, those are the things you're going to find. I think I've heard it attributed to Nelson Mandela and Steve Jobs, but I always love the quote, everything in this world is impossible until someone decides it isn't and they do it. And that's kind of where I like to leave the audience with that feeling. And then the last thing I talk about, I kind of go through all these various places we can put our focus. We can focus on things to complain about or things to be grateful for. We can focus on comparing ourselves to other, not in a good 4-to-1 way, but in a, I can't believe what the life they have that I don't, or how much they've succeeded and I haven't. And which, by the way, comparison, that's the number one ingredient for imposter syndrome. Just putting that out there. But we can focus on that.
All of social media. There you go.
There you go. Social media, which is just, and people it's not, when you're looking at social media, it's important to remember you're not looking at other people's lives. You're looking at curated content. That's just a big one. Anyway, But you can focus on that, or we can focus on personal improvement and realize the only person we have to compare ourselves to is the person we were yesterday. And baby steps are fine. I mean, if you only change 0.5% a day, in 200 days, you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
And so I prefer to focus on that. We can focus on things we can't control and go insane because we can't control them, or we can focus on the things we can control. Going back to what I said earlier, we can focus on being right, or we can focus on communicating through curiosity, which doesn't necessarily mean you can't be right. Of course, we all want to know what the truth is. But if someone sees something different than me, maybe instead of just telling them they're wrong or telling them what I think, maybe I should ask them a question and see if I can help them connect the dots. And the last thing I always talk about is we can focus on being happy, or we can focus on being fulfilled. And the core message there is, if you want to be happy, do something for yourself. But if you want to be fulfilled, do something for someone else. Your brain will actually reward you with an amazing neurotransmitter called serotonin. Dopamine is what puts us in a happy mood. Serotonin is what makes us a happy person. And we get that when we help other people. And it's amazing how the brain is set up to connect, and yet how we live in a world that makes it very, very difficult at times. But when we're intentional about it, like I said, sky's the limit on productivity, sky's the limit on happiness, and sky's the limit on fulfillment.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my God, just the mental, the mindset thing. Just the really quick question is,
of course,
while you've had that mindset, you're teaching it, when did you start applying it in that way, right? In that positive way of just really thinking, because it's something that's been talked about or we've read about, but it's only when you start making it practical, like, and actionable every day. So when did that start for you?
For me, well, it's interesting because I was doing, like I said, corporate training going back to 2014 or 15. And so I knew about Carol Dweck's research into growth mindset and how amazing it is. And, the thoughts around gratitude. But it's a practice. I still have days where it is a struggle. But I will say there's a tool I use that has been exceptionally helpful for me called the 5-minute journal. And this is a journal that literally takes less than 5 minutes. You start every morning. 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things that would make the day awesome, and 1 affirmation. What's something you're going to tell yourself throughout the day? Maybe something like, where focus goes, energy flows. Or maybe it's, I get to choose the things I look for. And then at the end of the day, just 3 things that went right and 1 thing you learned. And just doing that every day I've seen a noticeable difference in the time I started using that to now, because you actually realizing, like, all right, well, I have to fill in my journal later. What's something that went awesome today? Or what's something I can be grateful for? Whether that's, something as big as the nice weather, or something as small as, your dog's breath.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, your dog's breath when he's like behind you or in the bed. That's Scooter.
I'm not listening to you anymore. I'm not listening to you
no
anymore.
One is.
Let me see that baby boy there.
People don't realize that at just about every time I'm online, he is sitting behind me. He's my little breathing lumbar support. This is Scooter.
Seriously, that just must make you happy all day.
He does.
He's adorable. He can stay for the rest of the interview.
Absolutely. And, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to neuroscience. And so dogs, they're great for oxytocin. If you pet a dog for 3 to 4 minutes, your day is going to get a lot better. That's just the way it works. Oh,
wow. So good. All right. I'm mindful of your time, but we have to talk about mental health as the new superpower. And you recently shared that you were diagnosed with ADHD. Can we talk about that?
Well, exactly. I've had it my whole life. And one of the things that comes with it is life can be a lot harder. And you start feeling a lot of shame around the idea of, like, why does it seem that, like, it's so easy for everyone else to be productive and, like, have a clean and tidy office and, just be on top of everything. And it feels like such a struggle for me. And I was dealing with it, in therapy. I was dealing with if I'm being completely honest, our marriage counselor. And one day we were sitting there talking, and the counselor grabbed this book and read this passage and was like, I'm going to read this to you too. And just tell me if it resonates. And man, it was like a home run out of the park. Yeah, that's us. Totally. Ding, ding, ding. And then she just closes the book, hands it to me, and it's called The ADHD Effect on Marriage. And I was like, really? Wow. And she's like, yeah, check it out. And I read the book in 2 days, which is an anomaly for me. And everything started making sense. And then I got diagnosed. I I personally am taking medication now, which helps a lot. But more than the medication, it's just having the knowledge, having the vocabulary to talk about it, and understanding that I can have sympathy and empathy for myself and give myself a little grace, knowing that this is actually, that my brain is, neurodivergent. It works a little differently. Yeah. And it's also helped, my wife and, the people I work with understand that as well. And whether it's ADHD or whether it's, any condition, I love, if you haven't seen the Taylor Tomlinson, her last Netflix special, she's a stand-up comedian, and she really takes a deep dive into her diagnosis as bipolar. And what I love about conversations like that, whether they're funny or not, is it just takes away the stigma around it, because it's not weakness. It's just knowledge and understanding and getting to know yourself so you can be the most effective you that there is.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Taking away the stigma. I mean, that's such a big part of what we're even doing here, like with mental health awareness, right? It's just, let's talk about it more. It's a natural conversation. I was just saying someone the other day, it's physical fitness used to be the thing that only some people would talk about. Now it's all the videos. It's a daily conversation. It's a part of life. It's a holistic way of living. And so, right, that's kind of where we're coming with mental health and mental well-being. Well, in these last few minutes, what excites you about the conversation around mental health moving forward?
What excites me about is I have seen how much my life has improved with just the knowledge and, kind of like I said, getting rid of that stigma, and just, there's a feeling I have that if something feels embarrassing, that means it probably needs to be put front and center. That's kind of nature's little way of telling you, let's talk about this and figure it out. And kind of working through that was such a wonderful experience. And to now be where I am, that's an experience. What excites me is the idea of other people having that exact same experience, of people going to work, and because they have a great relationship, they're willing to be open, vulnerable, have these conversations that ultimately will improve their mental health. And of course, when our people are happy and fulfilled, that's when they do amazing things. That's when innovation takes off. That's when productivity takes off. And for any organization or leader to ignore that or leave those cards on the table, you are missing out on a lot of potential value. And so, but for me, it's just those stories of individuals having those epiphanies, having those breakthroughs, and kind of just taking control of their lives.
Yeah. And, with your topic around create a limitless culture, what are the one or two things that any manager, any leader of a team can do today to just start on a new course?
Biggest things, focus less on the quality of the information you share, more the quality of the questions you ask. The more we communicate through questions, the more connected we are. Because when you communicate through a question, it automatically removes all judgment and instead leans into curiosity. And then from there, we can get excited about, discoveries, ideas, and new pathways. In terms of connection, remember that the number one driver of productivity, engagement, happiness at work is great relationships at work. And the way we have deeper relationships is through vulnerability and trust. And so I always say, never be afraid to be vulnerable. And of course, the idea around that is, well, Ben, it's kind of scary because, we don't want to overshare. Great barometer is ask yourself, if this person shared this information with me, would I be grateful or would it give me pause? And if it gives you pause, then yeah, take a beat take a beat and think about before you share it. But there's a great AJ, I want to say Harbinger from the Art of Charm podcast has a great kind of system for vulnerability that I love and I share in my keynotes. Start off with disclosures, stories from your past. Oops, third grade, I spilled milk all over my jeans. I look like I peed my pants. It's funny, a little hurtful, but it's not a big deal. From there, you move on to your beliefs. This is my religion. This is my political beliefs. This is the direction I think the company should go in. And then you do that. And if the person reciprocates with their beliefs, then you can talk about your fears. These are the things that happened in my past that I think are impacting me now. These are the things that are happening now that I think will impact my future. And that's just a nice little stepping stone for how to go from like casual acquaintance to be more and more vulnerable with someone. And when you do that, the relationship just deepens on its own.
So many good nuggets of gold to help us create
limitless cultures, limitless lives.
That's it. Not to put you on the spot, but do you have any magic show for me to end this with or anything?
I don't, right? No, I don't.
Yeah, that's, you know what the
Ta-da.
magic show is going to be. Ta-da! I'm going to delete. I'm going to end us right now. That's the magic show. No,
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
Great
That really
talking to you,
was.
Vishana.
Listen, Ben, the thing is, again, like I keep saying, this is all truly valuable, concrete stuff that you share with organizations, their teams, their leaders. It's so important. Thank you so much for always being a speaker who is evolving the message, who is always, again, getting curious to learn more, to transform. And you really do great work. And I'm just so happy to know you, my friend, and to be able to get your message out in the world a lot more.
Vishana, it's always great talking to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And yeah, I hope everyone listening has a wonderful day.
Same here. Thanks so much, Ben. Talk soon.